Today I'm working on a Jeep 4.0 timing chain and timing chain cover. This is extremely similar to the Jeep 4.2 liter engine, and it has a lot in common with the Jeep 2.5 liter engine. So my issue here was that I had a crack in the timing chain cover. So it was a crack at the top of the timing chain cover, and it was leaking oil when the Jeep engine was running. So I needed to replace the timing chain cover, and while I was at it, I had it apart, I wanted to check the timing chain to see what condition it was in. You know, while I'm in there, I might as well check it out. So, just some basic stuff here. Obviously, to remove the cover, you're going to have to take apart some things. So I had to take the fan blades off, and there was an idler pulley right here for this belt setup. Now, not every setup for engine accessories and belts has an idler pulley there. Some have V-belts, some have different serpentine belt routings. You know, there's different accessories and shapes and things. So I had to remove that. Other Jeep engines might have a bracket right there to hold the alternator or the air conditioner compressor, or you know, whatever they need to hold. Some Jeep engines even have a fan mounted over here on a separate pulley from the water pump. So whatever you have to get out of the way, you have to get it out of the way. Then you can get access to all these bolts that hold the cover on. So I can go down here a little bit. Maybe you can see the bolts a little better. The bolt holes anyway. So there's a variety of holes. There's also 4 in the bottom that go through the oil pan. There's one here, one here, one here, and one here. 2 of those are supposed to be studs with nuts instead of bolts. It doesn't make a whole lot of difference. The studs are just to help with lining up the pan when you stick it on. Another thing that you have to do is remove the radiator. So the radiator and the shroud have to come out because you have to pull the harmonic balancer. And so the issue is that the puller for the harmonic balancer, this shaft that I'm holding in my hand, is so long that it hits the radiator. And so you have to get the radiator out of your way in order to pull the harmonic balancer off. Now, it's a good idea to use this kind of a puller that has these bolts that go into the harmonic balancer. You don't want to use the jaw grip pullers that grab the outer edge, because this rubber ring in the harmonic balancer between the inside and the outside, you don't want to pull the outside off of the inside. So the jaw puller is not a great idea. You need to pull from the center like this. Okay, so once you get in there, it's a good idea to check for slack. Now, you wouldn't really think that a metal chain would stretch much, but it does. So let's go over that next. So we're going to look at that from underneath down here. So this gives you can see how much slack is in that chain. And so what you would do is you stick this ruler here. It's difficult to do it one-handed, but all right, so you stick the ruler across, you line it up with the straight part of the chain, which is, it's over here at the moment. I have all the slack on this one side. Then you look at the marks on the ruler to see where the chain is, and you see how far it moves. This way you can measure how much slack you have. Now, if you have ½ inch or more, you're supposed to replace the chain. Now, catastrophic failure on a timing chain is when the chain comes apart or falls off the gear. What happens in that instance is the the crankshaft and the camshaft aren't synchronized, and the pistons go up when the valves are open, and they smash against each other, and you bend your valves, and then you have to rebuild the head at least. You might also damage the pistons. It's a bad day. This amount of slack is not enough to cause that kind of catastrophic failure. You can see the chain won't come off. Even if I pried on it with a screwdriver or whatever, there's just not enough slack for the chain to come off right now. But the issue is that with that slack, it's possible for the camshaft to turn slightly different than the crankshaft. They're not like solidly locked together. You can get like 7 degrees, I think, is the limit of difference before you're supposed to replace it. So what happens is your valves aren't opening quite when they're supposed to necessarily. It can vary, which isn't something you want for good performance. Hurts your gas mileage and your, horsepower performance. So I've got it apart already, and it's time to replace this chain. I measured it. It has 3/4 of an inch of slack instead of 1/2 an inch, so it's definitely beyond the limit. So what happens if you get too much slack in the chain? You can actually go quite a bit more before catastrophic failure. If you didn't have a leak and didn't take it apart to replace it, what would happen? So the chain would keep stretching. And here's the timing chain cover. Alright, the 4.0 and the 4.2 don't have a timing chain tensioner. You can see there's not one up in there. The 2.5 does have a tensioner down here in this area. Now that I'm making the video, I wonder if it's possible to install the 2.5 tensioner on a 4.0 or a 4.2. As far as I'm aware, it's not, but that might be something interesting to look into. Might help keep the slack down to a minimum. Jeep didn't do it from the factory, though. So the 4.0 and the 4.2 have this rub block here. And it just slides into these little metal tabs. And as you can see on this one, it's got some grooves in it where the chain's been riding against it. That's from the excess slack. So the chain has been hitting that. And if you go for long enough, then the chain stretches even more. Eventually it eats away this block. It starts to knock off these tabs. It just wears them down entirely. And really, excessive cases, it can start to get into the cover itself over here, through the block. And all that metal is and rubber is going through your oil and getting caught in your bearings. It's really bad for the engine. So, don't do that. Okay. So yeah, this one has a leak clear up at the top. You probably can't see it. It's a hairline crack. So this part right here is available new if you need to just replace that part. And if your cover is worn down and missing this entirely, definitely replace your cover. Here's another little wear point right here. This is for a pin that's in this camshaft bolt right here. That's just in case the bolt comes loose or anything. It keeps pressure on the camshaft to keep it from moving around, forward and backward in the engine. It's just supposed to go round and round, not sideways. So this is the oil slinger. It just comes off. This bolt is tightened to 80 foot-pounds. And the harmonic balancer, I don't know the foot-pounds off the top of my head, I'll have to check. But, so to get it off, when you're undoing the bolt, this is before you pull the harmonic balancer, the issue you'll run into is that the engine wants to spin because this crankshaft is a rotating thing inside the engine. So when you try to loosen the bolt, all you're going to do is rotate the engine. So you need to find a way to hold the internals of the engine still. One way to do that is to remove the spark plugs. And if you remove, let's say the number 1 spark plug, doesn't really matter which one, but if you remove a spark plug, and whenever that piston is coming up on the compression stroke, you'll be able to feel the air being pushed out of the hole, spark plug hole. Then you back it up a little bit and you shove some rope down the hole, and you can actually squish the rope inside the piston. That will lock the engine from moving. Make sure it's, heavy duty rope. You don't want to break anything off in there. And then once the engine is locked from moving, you can actually, that'll hold it still for you so you can get the bolt loose. It's a good idea to be, you want to be spinning the engine towards the counterclockwise direction, like you're trying to loosen the bolt, when you squeeze the rope in there. Because to get the rope out, you have to go the other way. So you'll have to put the bolt back in, and then rotate the engine just a little bit, enough to get the rope loose. And then just that small amount of movement won't tighten the bolt enough that you won't be able to get the bolt back out. So that's how you remove the rope afterwards, because of course you have to get it out of there. That's important. What you wouldn't want to do is the other way around. If you are spinning the engine clockwise and you stick the rope in the cylinder, then when you go to try to get the rope out and you have the bolt in, you're trying to spin the engine the other way, all you do is loosen the bolt and the engine doesn't spin and your rope's kind of stuck. Not something you want to get stuck in there. Of course, make sure foreign objects don't fall down inside your spark plug hole. So here's this little pin here. That just pulls out. And there's a spring in there also. I'm going to get a pick and pull that spring out so that we don't lose it. And this, I've already got this loose here. I stuck a metal bar through one of these holes against the engine block. There's some ribs in there. And that just sort of held the pulley or the sprocket in place for me to undo it. So that's ready to come out. And then after that, these pulleys just slide off. Now before you take them off, it's important to line up the timing marks. So you see this little dot right here lines up with this tooth on the sprocket, and we have a dot here on this one that lines up with this tooth, and you make sure that those are pointing towards each other. Then when you take the chain and the pulleys or the sprockets off, it's very important that you don't turn the crankshaft or the camshaft before you install the new ones. And when you install the new ones, you also install them with the dots lined up, just like that. If you were to spin one of those two shafts and then install the dots lined up, then you're not going to be timed right for your engine. Now on some engines that's not possible to do. I think this is one of those engines. I think there's a pin here for this sprocket that only allows it to go on one way, and I believe this sprocket lines up with a woodruff key right here, which is it's a metal rectangle kind of like this one, but it's further in. And so that would keep that from going on any wrong way. Okay, so that's just sort of the basics of timing chain cover replacement and chain replacement. That's not really what I wanted this video to be about, but I had to include this info here for the rest of the video. So what I really wanted to cover was the timing chain itself and the differences between the different years, and also the timing chain cover and the differences between the different years. And that might help you with why you would want to choose one chain or cover over the other for your application if you're swapping your Jeep engine into a different vehicle, or maybe you're modifying things. So for custom builds, there's some information that's not just stock stuff that I had to look up and I wanted to record the information somewhere. Okay, so this is one of the things I really wanted to talk about here. These are two different timing chain sets for Jeep 4.0 engines. I think 4.2 is the same thing. 2.5 could be a little different there because 2.5 has a tensioner. Okay, so this is the kind of chain used on 1993 and earlier engines. And this is what's used on the later engines, at least until 98 or so. They're very similar. This chain has 48 pins, though. The pin is the pivot point of the chain. This chain has 64 pins. As you can imagine, they have a number of teeth on the sprockets to match the number of pins on the chain. Not meaning that 48 is the number, but it's designed to work together so that the crankshaft rotates exactly twice for every one time that the camshaft goes around. So if you count the number of teeth on the sprockets, you'll find that the number of teeth here is exactly twice as many as the number of teeth here. So in this instance, I believe we have 18 and 36, and over here we have 24 and 48. Now I do have a factory service manual here. The official one, none of that Haynes or Chilton stuff. It's the real thing. And it talks about how to do this process. Now, this is the 1994 book, and it talks about the 48-pin chain. So these books, they continued to copy the information for the older chain even after they switched to the new chain. You'll see that in the Haynes and Chiltons also, and it causes a lot of confusion. As you can see here, I do have the alignment marks lined up. Here's one here. Here's the other one, and they're easier to see without the light here. So there's one and there's one. So the mark lines up with the tooth, and the teeth are pointing towards each other. That's important to make sure that the camshaft is properly aligned with the crankshaft. Because even though the sprockets only go on one way, you could still put the have one spun when you put the chain on. You don't want to do that. So it's important that those dots are towards each other. As far as the difference here, this is a single roller chain, which is the original style used before 93. And let me go ahead and take it off of here. You can see that it's kind of like a giant bicycle chain. So it has these pins in here that have a roller sleeve on them. So that rolls over the pin. So this is a single roller chain. Now they had a performance, or have a performance option that's called a double roller timing chain. And it's a sprocket that has, instead of this single column of teeth here, it has an additional column of teeth right next to it. And the chain is wide enough to fit on both columns of teeth, and it has an extra row of metal plates down the center with a roller on either side of the center metal plates. So it's like a double chain, kind of. It's like two chains combined together into one chain. And the idea is that that's stronger and that it doesn't stretch as fast or as much. And generally that's a good idea. I like double roller timing chains. But this is the next step up in technology. This is called a silent chain. Go ahead and get it off of here. So this chain does not have rollers. As you can see, it is nothing but metal plates. So still flexes just like a chain, but just no rollers. Alright, so one of the things about what the book says here is it's very, it stresses the importance of having a 48-pin chain. That's a little misleading because in '94, the year that this book is for, they actually used the 64-pin chain. And I think that might be printed in later editions of the book also, and like I said, it's also in the Haynes and the Chilton's manuals. So a lot of people end up thinking they need a 48-pin chain, and then they get their new chain, or they look at their old chain, and it's not that, and they become concerned. So here's what's really important. So the important thing here is that the crankshaft rotates twice for each time the camshaft rotates. And the number of pins isn't super important. If you were only replacing the chain, it would be important. But generally you replace the sprocket and the chain together because the teeth wear out just like the chain stretches. So if you're replacing the sprockets in addition to the chain, you can use either one of these. It doesn't matter. Now, this is the better style. This is the newer, upgraded, better technology version. So this is the one I would recommend. Go for this one. 64 pins. Another thing that the manual stresses is that the way to check the proper alignment is that after you put it on the engine with your dots lined up, it talks about how to rotate the marks, the timing marks here, to where they look something like this. I didn't put the chain on quite right. Okay, so something like this. And then you count the number of pins between the marks, and it's supposed to be 15 pins. And then that confuses a lot of people because if you switch to the 64-pin chain, then it's not 15 pins. And it's difficult to find a specification for how many pins is supposed to be if you do the same thing with this newer chain. Really, that's a convoluted way to do the whole thing. You don't need to rotate it to a particular clock angle and count the number of pins. That's making it unnecessarily complicated. So the important thing here is that what you need to do is once you get it on with your gears lined up so that your timing marks are lined up with each other. Okay, there we go. Those are lined up. So once you get that installed, what you do is you put the crank bolt in and use your ratchet to turn over the engine. This is easier if you take the spark plugs out so you're not fighting compression. But you use your ratchet to turn over the engine. Just by hand is fine. And you make sure that after you've rotated these marks around a couple times, that they still line up with each other. If they do, you're good. It means you have the right number of pins compared to the right number of sprocket teeth. If you have the wrong number of pins compared to your sprocket teeth, which really isn't supposed to happen, but if it did happen, then what you would find is that after rotating it a couple times, you weren't back to your starting point. It would be, one of the dots would be offset, and it would get further offset the more you rotated it, until eventually it got so offset that it would be back around to the starting point, but your engine wouldn't run that way. So the best way to check whether you've installed it properly is to just rotate the engine by hand a few times and make sure your dots still line up when you're done. I believe that's what the later instructions say to do for this when they finally started printing them in the books. They say turn the engine over by hand a couple times, make sure your dots line up. And that system works both for this chain and for this chain, and for pretty much every other manufacturer's chain on any engine made. As long as it's a 4-cycle engine, like most internal combustion engines, because the crankshaft has to rotate exactly twice for every one time the camshaft goes around. That's just basic internal combustion stuff. Okay, so yeah, the gist of that is if you have one of these older kind and you go to buy a new chain and they sell you one of these, don't panic. It's an upgrade. Just install it. Of course, pay attention to what you're doing, do it right, but don't panic about trying to get the older style that's obsolete. Oh, one more quick note here. So I mentioned this was used up until 98. After 99, 99 and up, they still used this same crankshaft gear and this same chain, but the camshaft sprocket changed. So if you're working on a 99 and up, you can't use that, and you can use these two pieces, but your camshaft sprocket will be different. So when you're ordering your parts, just make sure you're ordering for your right year to match your engine. And the number of teeth around the sprocket will be the same because it has to go with this chain and this gear. But there'll be some kind of a difference in the way that it attaches to the camshaft itself. I went ahead and pulled up these part numbers and applications from the Cloyes company. I wanted to go ahead and go over them and just show you the differences, how things changed through the years here. So I'm going to start out here with the 3.8 liter engine. This is from 1966 to 1978. I just threw this in here because it uses exactly the same parts as the 4.2. So you can see this row here is cam sprocket all the way across. We have the timing chain all the way across. We have the crank sprocket all the way across. And then we have a kit with all three of those parts. So these three is this kit, these three is this kit, these three is this kit, etc. You see how it works here. So the old 3.8, I've not worked on one of those. That's older than the stuff that I work on as far as Jeeps go. But it uses exactly the same parts here as this 4.2. So same kit for 3.8 from 66 to 78 and the 4.2 engine from 71 to 81. Then we get here to the 4.2 from 1982 to 1990, which is the end of the 4.2. And you can see they have the same cam sprocket and the same crank sprocket, but a different chain. So the difference here is that the chain is 3/8 of an inch shorter. So they tighten the chain a little bit. I don't know why. I guess just because they could. As far as I know, the spacing for the cam and the crank in the engine block aren't any different than the previous years. And you can see that the sprockets are the same. So I guess they just sort of tighten it up a little. Moving on to the 4.0 here, from 87 to 93. This is some different parts. You can see they're all different parts here. This is because this is a single roller chain. Now, these Cloyes part numbers over here, this is what I called the silent chain. I believe Cloyes calls it an inverted tooth design. But same thing. So these chains here, they don't have rollers. They are made entirely of the metal bars. So this chain right here, this is the single roller chain. And the reason these sprockets are different is because they're designed for the single roller chain. So the shape of the tooth on the sprocket is a little different. It has to engage with that roller instead of engaging with the flat metal plates. Of course, the chain itself is different because, like I said, it's a roller chain instead of this other design. Moving on, 4.0 from 94 to 98. Again, we have some different part numbers here. And from here on over, these are also the silent type chain, inverted tooth design. So the only roller chain on this chart is this column right here. All right, so these sprockets over here are the inverted tooth design, And from right here, we start having the 48 teeth and 24 teeth instead of the older design over here. These all had, what was it, 36 and 18? So these are the 48 pin chains, and these are the 64 pin. And then right here, 4.0 from 99 up to 2006. You can see the only difference here is the cam sprocket, and that's because the cam has a keyway in it, so it only goes on one way. I mean, these other ones also only go on one way, but it's just sort of a different design with how the sprocket attaches to the camshaft. And last, over here on the right, is the 2.5 engine, which has its own thing going on. I don't think I'd try to mix the 2.5 stuff with any of these other parts. So if you got a 2.5, just stick with these 2.5 items. If you have a 4.2 or a 4.0, I think you can use any one of these you want, as long as you're using the same column. So you have to pick one of these columns, and you can use it on any of these applications. The main thing I'm doing in this video is I'm removing one of these single roller type chains and replacing it with one of these with the more teeth and the silent inverted tooth design. So in this case, they're both 4.0 applications, but I'm pretty sure that these 4.2 kits would have also worked just fine. Now, if you're building a stroker, if you go in and look on any of the stroker forum posts, anything like that, anywhere where people are talking about building stroker engines, some people will tell you to use the 4.2 timing chain kit. Some people will tell you to use the 4.0 timing chain kit. A lot of people will get the Cloyes double roller timing chain kit, which isn't listed here because it's kind of it was never originally used on anything. It's kind of a custom aftermarket part. But that Cloyes double roller timing chain kit fits on both the 4.2 and the 4.0. And I'm pretty sure you can pick any one of these, 4.2 or 4.0, and stick it on. Just the main thing here is you really need to keep each column of parts together. And the reason for that is these different cam sprockets right here, sometimes they have different outside diameters, and these chains can have different chain lengths to match that sprocket diameter, just the way they designed it, for whatever reason. So you don't want to swap parts from different columns together, because if you do, you could end up with extra slack or maybe a chain that won't go on. But as long as you stick to stuff from the same column, you should be all right. Okay, this is one of those new timing rub blocks that slides into the timing chain cover. So next I want to talk about the timing chain covers a minute. There's 3 different timing chain covers that were used over the years, and there's a few different reasons why you might want to choose one of them over the other one. All right, for timing chain covers, there was 3 different covers. I only have 2 of them here, but I can tell you about the middle one. The middle one's the one I don't have. So this is the early one, and this is the last one. There's another one in the middle. So this is the first one. It was used from 1975 to 1993, thereabouts. 2.5, 4.2, 4.0. I believe it was used on all of them. Pretty much all of those 3 engines use the same cover within those years. Occasionally there's a 1-year difference in changeover for different body styles, like Cherokee versus Wrangler, maybe, something like that. But, give or take a year, that's kind of the range we're looking at. So this is the earliest one. Again, I said 75 to 93. So this is an AMC logo, and part number is 8933002985. So, some of the unique features of this are this piece right here. You can see it's not over here on this one. So this tube, so that is for an oscilloscope probe, which is like a magnetic reader for a big diagnostic machine that the dealership used, and it checked the timing. It was just a way for the computer to read the timing. That became obsolete and they didn't need it anymore. Eventually they got rid of that. So this is the only cover which has this tube thing on it. So I suppose that's an easy way to identify it. Another feature of this design is this bolt hole right here. You can see that it kind of sticks out higher than the face of the cover. And on the other two, it does not do that. So this one, you can see it's actually down a little bit. Basically, this bolt hole is down the same as these other three are on this one. This bolt hole right here is important for, on my belt setup, this is important for an idler pulley. This may be used for other things, various brackets or whatever. Another one is this one. Similar story there. It's used for brackets and things. On my application, this goes into the alternator bracket. There are plenty of other bolts holding that bracket in place. If this one was missing, I don't think it would be any big deal. So this is what the oldest style cover looks like. It has this kind of triangle shape here on the cover, and if you flip it over on the other side, it does have this little bump for that button on the camshaft sprocket to push out against. So the middle one, which I don't have here, was used from that 93, 94 time period until about 99, 2000, right in that area. And it does not have this tube, but it does still have the timing marks. And you can see over here that the next newer one does not have the timing marks. It has a 0 mark, but it doesn't have the rest of the bar. So the middle one does have the timing marks. The middle one does have this lower bolt hole like this instead of the raised. And I haven't seen any reason for that difference yet. Not sure what it is. Maybe some kind of bracket goes there on some application that I haven't seen. But you could potentially file this down or put a washer or some spacers on this to make that work. The middle one does have this for that pulley. It also has these all the same. It has this triangle shape, whereas you can see this new one has kind of a curved shape here. That's just like decorative. I don't see any difference or reason for it. On this bolt hole, you want to be careful because on my belt setup, this bolt hole, the bolt face, just the very top edge of the bolt head touches the belt a little bit. So it's sort of, the belt polished the bolt head. So I don't know what's up with that, but that's the way it is. So keep an eye on that. You might want to file your bolt head down or something. They fixed that for the third cover here. So this is a much further down recessed hole. And yeah, So the middle one is mostly like this. The middle one on the inside, the middle one looks like this. It has this casting line right here and this little U shape. I don't think that's any big deal, but that is the way it looks. The middle one looks like this. However, this new one does not have the dimple in the middle because these engines had the different cam sprocket that I talked about earlier, so they apparently didn't need that dimple. But the middle case does have the dimple, even though it looks like this. It has that dimple in it. And yeah, maybe that could just be solved by a longer spring or something. It's just a safety measure in case your bolt comes loose. It's probably not a huge deal. So, on to this third one here. So this is the 99 or 2000 and up version. This is used with the automatic belt tensioner when it became fairly standard on most vehicles, or most Jeeps there. So it doesn't have the timing port thing. It doesn't have the timing marks. It just has the 1-0 mark. It is missing this hole for the bracket, and it is missing this, which is used for an idler pulley on the belt setup that I was working on. So this really doesn't make any difference, and this difference here doesn't really make any difference. This, check your application. If you really need this hole for mounting one of your brackets or something, then like if there's not enough other bolts holding that bracket in place, then you would have to use either this cover or the middle cover. You wouldn't want to use the new cover. Similarly, if you really need this for the idler pulley or for whatever else bracket might be fastened there on an older vehicle, then it's important to have either this cover or the middle cover. Either one of those will work, because this third cover doesn't have it. And conversely, if you have the newer style automatic belt tensioner, then I think this raised one here is probably in the way. I'm not sure if that's in the way or not. It might not be. But for that newer style automatic belt tensioner, it kind of sits here. Maybe that's something to do with what that curve's for. For that, you would want to use this timing chain cover. Now, as far as I know, you could install that newer 2000 and up, whatever, automatic belt tensioner on the older engine and that whole belt setup. You need this timing chain cover, though, or to grind that off until it's not in the way anymore. Other than that, they all install on whatever engine you're working on. 2.5, 4.2, 4.0. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't fit. All the other bolt holes line up. They're pretty much the same. I guess I can give you the part numbers for the different ones. So I gave you the part number for this one earlier. The part number for the middle one is 5302021, and the part number for this newest one is 5301042. You might see some other part numbers for timing chain covers. Those are probably a package deal, the cover with the oil seal included, or maybe the cover with the seal and the oil pan gasket included, because usually you have to lower the oil pan a little to install the cover, and then they want you to have a new gasket. So there might be some other parts. If you see a part number that's not one of those three that I gave you, it probably comes with some other part. I think that's it. Mainly I wanted to go over that because I was looking into working up automatic belt tensioner on this Jeep, and I wanted to know what was required, and I happened to need to replace the timing chain cover while I was at it, so I was trying to figure out which cover I need to use. Seems to be that this is the one to use with the automatic belt tensioner, but until I'm actually ready to install it, I have to use this because I need that hole right there for the idler pulley. So that's where it's at. Hopefully that helped you out if you're doing something custom or installing a different year engine into your vehicle and you're trying to figure out what you have, or if your part's original, maybe you're trying to do a restoration and you want to have, the exact right one. Hopefully this will help you out. It might even help if you're trying to order one and you don't know which part to order. Alright, just a quick follow-up here. The new timing chain is on. This is the newer style timing chain on a 1988 engine. So this is how much slack a new chain has. I measured it, and this is 3/8 of an inch instead of 3/4 of an inch. So new chain, 3/8 of an inch slack.